We were having sex with the boy, and at the most inappropriate moment, my dad entered the room. And the guy, confused, says, "We're playing in the city here. Do you want to join?" As a result, the guy is in the hospital. You never really appreciate the gravity of locking a door until your world comes crashing down around you in a whirlwind of limbs and an errant paternal fist. But let's rewind a little. It was a sweltering July evening, one of those days where the air itself feels sticky, and you can't tell if your skin is glistening from the humidity or the sheer excitement of what's to come. After 6 long months apart, Alex and I were finally reunited. 6 months of late-night phone calls that left my cheeks aching from grinning at his pixelated face on the screen. 6 months of care packages with handwritten notes that still make my heart flutter. 6 months of countdowns until we could be together again. I had planned everything to a T. My parents, ever the social butterflies, were supposed to be out at one of those interminable dinner parties with their college friends, exchanging gossip and tales of the good old days, leaving the house blissfully empty. Alex arrived, looking just as I remembered, no, better. The familiar sight of his mischievous grin and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled sent a wave of giddy anticipation through me. We barely made it through the front door before we were tangled in each other's arms, our laughter and whispers of longing filling the hallway as we stumbled toward my bedroom. Once inside, the door swung shut behind us, a flimsy barrier to the rest of the world. Clothes quickly became a distant memory, scattered across the floor, in our haste to close the gap that had felt infinite for so long. The room was filled with the intoxicating scent of jasmine from the open window, mingling with the heady, familiar smell of Alex's cologne. The night felt perfect, and as we fell onto the bed, our bodies moving in a frenzied, joyful dance, it seemed like the universe had finally given us this precious moment to make up for all the time lost. Time, which had dragged so cruelly over the past months, now seemed to blur, each second dissolving into the next in a blissful haze. My heartbeat was a steady drum in my ears, drowning out everything but the feel of Alex against me, his breath on my skin, our whispered promises and soft laughter. It was a reunion of soul and body, and for those few moments, nothing else mattered. But, as fate would have it, this perfect bubble was destined to burst. In my excitement and certainty that my parents would be out until late, I had neglected to lock the door. A simple oversight, a minuscule detail that suddenly became monumental when, without warning, the door swung open, and there stood my father. "Dad," I gasped, my heart plummeting into my stomach. For a fleeting moment, the room was frozen in a tableau of horror. My father's face was a mask of shock, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly as he took in the scene. Me, his little girl, in the throes of passion with my boyfriend, who was now desperately fumbling to cover himself with a discarded shirt. My brain, frantically trying to process the situation, failed to send any coherent signals to my mouth, leaving me gaping like a fish on dry land. Alex, ever the quick thinker, or at least that's what he thought in the heat of the moment, blurted out, "We're playing in the city here. Do you want to join?" Silence, deafening, soul-crushing silence. For a second, I thought I might have hallucinated the whole thing. But then my father's face darkened with an expression I had only seen a handful of times in my life, an expression that preceded grounding, yelling, and, once, a very stern talk about the dangers of sneaking out past curfew. My dad moved with a swiftness that belied his age. In a flash, he had crossed the room, his hand swinging out in a blur of paternal rage. His fist connected with Alex's jaw, a sound so visceral it seemed to echo off the walls. Alex stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock and pain, before collapsing in a heap on the floor. I screamed, scrambling off the bed to interpose myself between them, but my father was already winding up for another swing. "Dad, stop," I cried, my voice breaking with panic. "You're hurting him." His next punch landed on Alex's temple, a sickening thud that made my stomach lurch. Alex crumpled, unconscious before he hit the ground. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the harsh rasp of my father's breathing and my own ragged sobs. "Call an ambulance," my father muttered, his voice hollow, his anger spent. Hands shaking so badly I could barely dial, I fumbled for my phone. The operator's voice was cool and clinical, a stark contrast to the chaos around me as I choked out the words, my boyfriend ... he's unconscious. My dad ... we need help. Please, hurry. The minutes that followed stretched into eternity. I knelt beside Alex, my fingers trembling as they brushed his hair away from his forehead. His face, normally so animated and full of life, was pale and still. I whispered to him, desperate reassurances that I wasn't sure were for him or for me. You're going to be okay. Just hang on, please, Alex. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they drew closer. My father stood to the side, his face ashen, eyes locked on Alex's prone form with a look of horror and regret. It was as if the reality of what he'd done was only now beginning to sink in. He looked at me, his expression one of profound remorse, but I couldn't meet his gaze. Not yet. The paramedics arrived, their efficiency a balm to my frayed nerves. They moved with practiced ease, assessing Alex's injuries, their faces grave. "Miss, we need to take him to the hospital," one of them said, his voice gentle but firm. I nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. "I'm coming with you." My father, who had been hovering uncertainly by the doorway, stepped forward. "I'm coming too," he said, his voice hoarse. "Please, I need to make sure he's okay." I wanted to tell him no, to push him away, but the look on his face, the raw agony and guilt, stopped me. Instead, I just nodded, too exhausted and scared to argue. The ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights and silent prayers. I held Alex's hand the whole way, murmuring words of comfort and encouragement, willing him to wake up, to squeeze my hand, to do anything that would tell me he was still with me. At the hospital, they whisked Alex away for tests and left me standing in the harsh, sterile corridor, my father a silent presence beside me. The bright, fluorescent lights seemed to amplify every emotion, every fear, until I felt like I might explode from the pressure. My father sat across from me, his head in his hands. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of his actions. For the first time, I saw not just the man who had raised me, but a man struggling with his own flaws, his own regrets. I wanted to reach out, to tell him that we would find a way through this, but I couldn't, not yet. Hours dragged by, each minute an agony of waiting and uncertainty. Finally, a doctor emerged, his expression calm and reassuring. "Your boyfriend is stable," he said. "He has a concussion and some bruising, but he's going to be fine." Relief washed over me so intensely that I felt my knees buckle. I sank into a chair, my head in my hands, the tears I had been holding back finally spilling over. I was vaguely aware of my father sitting beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder, a tentative gesture of support. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I didn't mean to hurt him. I just ... I saw you and I lost control. I was scared." I looked up at him, my eyes filled with a tumult of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion. "Dad, you could have killed him," I said, my voice trembling. "How could you do that?" He shook his head, tears glistening in his eyes. "I don't know. I saw you and I panicked. I'm so sorry." For the first time, I saw my father not as the infallible figure I had always known, but as a man capable of mistakes, of fear, of regret. It was a painful realization, but one that brought with it a strange sense of clarity. I knew that forgiveness would come, but it would take time. When Alex finally woke up, his eyes bleary and unfocused, his first words were a weak attempt at humor. "Next time, maybe we should stick to Scrabble." I laughed through my tears, relief and love flooding my heart. He was going to be okay, and that was all that mattered. The days that followed were a blur of hospital visits and difficult conversations. My father and Alex sat down together, both of them sheepish and regretful. They talked, really talked, for the first time, and while it wasn't an easy conversation, it was a necessary one. Slowly, life began to return to something resembling normal. Alex recovered, and my father worked hard to earn back the trust he had shattered. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of tension and sadness, but we all grew stronger from the experience. Looking back, it's hard to believe how one impulsive moment could have such far-reaching consequences. It was a lesson in the fragility of life, the power of forgiveness, and the importance of locking the door. But most of all, it was a reminder that love, even in the face of chaos and confusion, has the power to heal. The bond between Alex and me grew stronger, forged in the fires of adversity. And my relationship with my father, while scarred, was ultimately mended by our shared commitment to understanding and forgiveness. So here I am, reflecting on that fateful night with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. It was a night that changed everything, a night that taught me more about love and resilience than I could have ever imagined. And while I wouldn't wish such a traumatic experience on anyone, I am grateful for the lessons it taught me, and for the strength it revealed in all of us.